Welcome to our webinar at One Click Factory about the transition alternatives when transitioning from CAL to AL. I will be your presenter, Mantas. I'm an NEV developer and NEV/Business Central developer, and I'm going to present to you this topic today. So before we start, we can see two numbers on the screen, and before you guys start guessing what do these numbers mean, the left number is the average number of modifications that an add-on solution in CAL has. So basically, for an add-on solution to work, most of the time there are at least 44,000 lines of code added to make the solution work. The number on the right is the average number of hours required to move this solution from CAL to AL. And when moving from CAL to AL, we have a couple of transition alternatives. And for example, if I select a different alternative, I can get a significant decrease in the number of hours that I would need to move the solution from CAL to AL. And this is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the transition alternatives that we have when moving from CAL to extensions and how to differentiate between them. Or in other words, what shortcuts can I take when I want to scope a customer's or mine solution for moving from CAL to extensions. So the agenda for today's webinar looks like this. So the first off, we're going to talk about the options when moving a CAL solution to AL. So we're going to talk about the transition alternatives. And then we're going to talk about what transition alternatives should be used for specific target platforms. So we're going to look at the on-premise version of Business Central, and also we're going to look at the SaaS version a bit. Then we're going to jump into the bit more technical part of the webinar. We're going to start talking about CAL to AL limitations and how these limitations are spread according to specific transition steps which were made by One Click Factory. And at the last leg of the webinar, we're going to have the recently asked question session, because we have gotten some questions from the partners before about specific services. And lastly, we're going to have a short Q&A session. So I think it's time to begin. So let's begin with the question of what options do I have when moving from CAL to AL? And there are three options when moving from CAL to AL. So let's begin with the least recommended one. And the least recommended one is modifying the base application of Business Central. And modifying the base application of Business Central means that I take the standard objects of Business Central, the standard base app, and I add the changes directly to my base app. So these are all the standard objects, and I add additional changes directly on those objects. So for example, if I can open up my items table and add additional fields, modify those fields, or maybe delete even some fields if I see they're not fit. And this modified base app alternative is quite similar to the things we used to have on CAL, or we still have on CAL. In CAL, we can open up any object and modify that object directly. So why is the modified base application not really recommended? So the maintenance, because of the maintenance and the upgrade process. So let's say that I want to upgrade a modified base application solution from an older release of Business Central to a newer one. So the upgrade process would look similarly to this. I would take my full solution, which has the standard objects and my custom objects, and I would need to know what differences have I added to this specific solution. So to know, I would compare it with the standard objects, and I would get the deltas between these two solutions. So at the end of the day, I would get only the differences that are my specific code changes. When I would have these deltas, I would move these deltas to the newer, I would merge these deltas with the newer standard of Business Central objects, and then I would have these objects and I would have the solution. The difficult part is that this process is not as easy as it may seem, because you always have to move the code line by line, and always some kind of conflict is going to occur. Maybe a change has happened in the newer version. Maybe some function needs to be re-implemented, and that may cause issues. And the biggest concern is that if I will want to update this solution to a newer version of Business Central than before, I will need to do the same process over and over again. So what other alternatives do we have? The other alternative is having a fully based extension. So in an extension, in the perfect world, we would have the base application of Business Central fully intact without any touches, and we would have the solution, our solution, completely separated from the base application, and we can use that solution anywhere we want. And if possible, this is perfect due to the fact that it's a lot easier to maintain. Every solution and every change that I have made is in one specific place, and I am able to use it any way I like. And even the upgrade process is going to be a lot easier. Then the second thing is it's easier to install. So let's say that I am an on-premise version of Business Central. To install the new extension, I can simply run publish extension, and then I will be able to use this application. Also, it's the same with uninstalling. If I no longer need that specific solution on my Business Central, I can just simply uninstall it from the extension management page directly on Business Central. And lastly, if I have a full base extension and I know that this extension goes through with all app source requirements, I'm able to publish this extension on app source. Okay, so having an extension is quite nice, but there comes some caveats when moving from CAL to AL directly to a full based extension. And the thing is that it's not always fully possible to move to an extension, because, or if it's possible, it may take a lot more time and it may cost a lot more and require a lot more implementation. For example, so let's say that let's jump back to the RTC clients of Business Central or even NAV, and we have the sales order page opened. And I have added an additional modification on the sales line, which is basically a new sales line type called bicycle service. And this bicycle service is an additional option which I have added through CAL. I opened up the object directly, I opened up the specific field, and I added the additional option string. So the issue is that in the current version of Business Central, the 150 release of Business Central, I am not able to extend an option field. And this is one of the bigger issues when moving from CAL to AL, that currently the option fields are not extendable. So what other options do we have when moving from CAL to AL? The last option is having the best of both worlds, or in other words, a hybrid solution. And we have in a hybrid solution, we have an extension in which most of the code is run, and also, if not possible to move from CL to AL, we leave some modifications in the base application. And why is this optimal for most solutions? So if possible, most modifications are moved to extensions. And this is quite good because we move as many modifications as possible to extensions, and we already have an extension to be made in progress. The best thing is that if not possible to move, or we see that it requires a lot of implementation, we can just wait and see what happens. We can just wait and see and leave those modifications in the base application. And this is quite good because, for example, let's say that let's take the same example as we did before. I have added an option on the sales line called bicycle service, and Currently, in the 150 release of Business Central, the bicycle service option is not it's not possible to extend. But in the upcoming version of the 160 release of Business Central, we have started to see enumerators come up in the options instead of the options, and enumerator option fields are extendable. That means I will be able to easily re-implement this change in the upcoming release of Business Central, not the one I have currently. The third one is that it can be done in parts. I can move some functionality to extensions, then move some later, and there will not be a big problem currently. And the last but not the least, is I can ask Microsoft for help when moving to extensions. And when moving to extensions, you have to move the code to subscribers. Those subscribers need to go to publisher, need to connect to publishers, and then that code is going to be run. So the issue is most of the time that when you want to move the code from the base application to extensions, sometimes those publishers in the standard do not exist. And what I could do is I could go to Microsoft's GitHub page and ask for their help when moving the solution. For example, I can ask for a specific publisher to be added in a specific place of the code, and maybe in the next or the next release after, that publisher may come up in the base application. Okay, so the cons is that this is not recommended for ISP providers, and specifically if they want to publish it on app stores, because a hybrid model is not publishable on app stores due to the fact that I am modifying the base application. Okay, so let's recap for a bit. So we have three options, and the least recommended one is modifying the base application. We take the standard objects of Business Central, the standard app, and modify the changes directly on the base application. This is not recommended due to the fact that the upgrade process is going to be a lot more difficult to a newer release of Business Central, and the maintenance may get a little bit difficult. The second way is having a fully based extension, but having an extension might cost a lot more than it should, or maybe it would in the next release of Business Central. The third option is the hybrid option, in which we have the best and worst of both worlds, in which we modify the standard base application, but also we have a separate extension for the solution. So yeah, these are the main free transition alternatives. But as you know, Business Central has two target platforms, and these free transition alternatives are not available on both platforms themselves. So let's jump a bit and talk about target platforms of Business Central. So there are two target platforms of Business Central, and the first one is the one we all know and love. It's the on-premise version of Business Central. And the on-premise version of Business Central is the Business Central or on our own machines, on our local servers, in which we fully control the infrastructure, and we also fully control what is happening on those environments. We can go to the SQL management, we can use PowerShell, we can publish a separate base application, and we have full control on the platform. And the second thing, the second target platform is Business Central, the software as a service model, or in other words, Business Central on the cloud, the SaaS version. And the SaaS version of Business Central is a bit different from the on-premise release of Business Central. Business Central in the SaaS is the one Business Central that we do not control the infrastructure on. We basically go to a browser or go to a web app and then start using Business Central right away. And this version is really good for smaller customers. They are able to use Business Central at a lower cost without thinking about any type of infrastructures, securities, and so on. So the thing is that on the on-premise release of Business Central, we manage the infrastructure. That means that I am able to publish extensions on it. I'm able to publish a modified base application and an extension on it. And I'm able to use just the modified base app if I want to. On the SaaS version of Business Central, since we cannot connect through PowerShell, since we cannot modify the base application, the only way to modify a SaaS solution is by having an extension. And these are the differences between these two platforms. On the on-premise release of Business Central, I can have these three models: an extension, a hybrid, and a modified base application. On the SaaS version, I can have extensions, and that's about it. So before we jump to the technical part, let's define how we will go on later in the webinar. And I have created a solution example, and it's called Bicycle Company. And we chose Bicycle Company for a specific reason. And if you guys remember, in the Kronos company, which would come with the NAV versions, the first item that would come up, I think it was a wheel or some bikes related stuff. So to commemorate that, we took the Bicycle Company. So the Bicycle Company sells bicycles and bicycle parts, and it has some custom functionality built into it. So the Bicycle Company has some functionality to sell fully built bicycles. They have some special additional categories for colors, maybe stickers, and the things that go with bikes. And they have asked us, or you as the partner, to move their current CL solution, which is on NAV or Business Central, to extensions. And the first question that may come up when moving to extension is, what do I need to know, or what do I need to do to move my solution to extensions? Or even, what limitations do I have when moving a solution from CAL to AL? And the solution is this. This is the ugliest slide that I have ever shown in any type of presentations in my full career, but these are all of the CAL to AL limitations that we identify at One Click Factory and with specific tools. And we're gonna look through some of them in this specific webinar, but if you would like to go more in depth about every and which step and issue in this in these limitations, there is a specific limitation description that can be found on our One Click Factory website. And if you would like to get this limitation report, it's really easy. You can go to the One Click Factory page, and on the top bar, you can click on Upgrade, and an additional bar is going to come up. And if you click on the CL2 Extension Analyzer, a new page is going to pop up. And at the bottom of the page, we have a couple of download documents that you can download anytime. And one of the documents at the bottom is limitations to transition from CL to AL, which we identify in the CL2 Extension Analyzer. And this has all of the descriptions that you may need when moving from CAL to AL. Okay, so we're still going to talk about some of the limitations, but at One Click Factory, we have split these limitations to specific transition steps that we do when moving a solution from CAL to AL. And the first part is done not even on the AL side, but on the CAL side, and it's called cleanup. And the first thing we do always is we remove any unused functionality from our customer's Business Central solution. So for example, we remove the unused variables, the unused functions, the unused objects, and we do everything still on CAL. We do the cleanup because later when we want to move from CAL to AL, we want to reimplement as we will have a lot less to reimplement if we remove stuff that is no longer relevant to your specific solution. And yeah, when we do the cleanup, it's time to start moving from CL to AL. And the first step and the first jump from CL to AL looks about like this. And the first step is to move your solution to the new syntax. And this new syntax and we're going to talk about what is the new syntax a bit later in the webinar. But let's talk about all the steps that you need to go through when moving from CL to AL. So the first step when moving from CL to AL is moving to new syntax. And before I explain what is the new syntax, I'm going to show how easy it is to start. So basically, we take the standard solution of Business Central on which our custom solution is based on, and we run a specific command called export nav application object. And after we run this command in PowerShell, we're gonna get a text, a standard object text file on which the new syntax is based on. Then we do the same with our custom solution. We take our custom solution, use the export to new syntax, and then we're gonna have our custom solution in the new syntax of Business Central. And if you would like to ask, how does the new syntax look? This is a text file which compares the new syntax and the old one. So let's take an example of the date. In the old syntax, the date is shown in a specific format, and in the new syntax, the date is shown in a completely different format than before. Also, let's take a look at the source table. On the old syntax, we have the object specific name and also its number. On the new syntax, we have a specific name called, for example, on the old is table 27, and on the new is item. Also, there are some differences that are added to the code. And the first one is that all ID-based, most of the ID-based objects are changed into specific names. So for example, the code unit of 1400 is changed to document no visibility. And next to that, some additional changes are made in the syntax of the code. For example, if functions are now lowercase, then begins are lowercase as well. And most of the system functions are made to be lowercase. And one of the questions that we get is, okay, I exported my solution to the new syntax. Can I re-import it to the solution? And the question is no. If you will have the text field with the new syntax, you will not be able to import it directly back into NAV or Business Central. Okay, so let's say that I have my both solutions, my standard solution and my custom solution on the new syntax. So the next thing is to start thinking about how do we move to AL. So I have my custom solution and I want to move only the differences between the standard and custom solutions. And basically, I only want to move the code that I have added to the standard solution. So what I would do is I would compare my custom solution with the standard solution, and I would get deltas, which are basically the code that I have written in my custom solution. Then I would take this custom solution and then use a Microsoft provided tool called Text2AL, which basically creates most of the AL objects from the deltas. And why I say most is that not all modifications are not all deltas are moved automatically. For example, if I have any conflicts in those deltas when I compare custom and standard solutions, these deltas are not going to be moved to AL automatically. That means that I will have to move these differences hand by hand, code by code, into the new extension solution. And we do this in a step called move to events. So the move to events step is basically taking the custom code in our standard objects and moving this custom code to our extension. So we take the custom code procedures and move to events, then connect those events or subscribers to the publishers, and we try to do this with as much code as possible. There are always some issues when moving to events, and specifically some limitations. And one of those is, for example, if I have any new parameters added to a standard function, any standard function with new parameters, I will not be able to move these modifications into my extension. I will need to re-implement them in some other specific way. Also, one of the most common issues are exit functions. And exit functions, they do what they do is they exit from a function when they are called. And exit functions are not easily re-implemented with events due to the fact that they're not gonna exit from the function, they're gonna exit from the specific subscriber, and they're not gonna do anything in the code. So these exit functions need to be re-implemented, maybe with some handlers, but they're not easily re-implemented. That means that when I have some code that I know I'm not able to move, I need to start thinking about what modifications should I leave in the base app. And these are most of the unsupported changes in the base these are the unsupported changes that can be when moving from CL to AL, or basically to extensions. And one thing is that if I have any type of flow changing statements, for example, if statements, for example, switch statements, what's going to happen is I'm not able to move this code to a separate extension. I'm going to need to leave this code in the base application. Also, let's say that I have some code which does not have any publisher next to that code. That means that I'm going to need to re-implement that code in a specific way, or leave the code in the specific place that it is, and then maybe ask for Microsoft to add an additional publisher, but I will need to probably leave that code in the base application. And one of the key things also when talking about base app modifications is that when moving to extensions, you're not allowed to create any type of breaking changes. So for example, a breaking change is something that can cause the customer to lose data. So for example, I'm not able to change the table keys. I'm not able to take a specific field, let's say the item number field, and change the length of its number from 20 to 10, because that means that I may cause a breaking change, and this may cause errors in my solution. That means that I may have to leave these types of changes in the base application, and or either way, I would maybe need to implement them in extensions, but it may cost me a ton of time and effort. So when I decide how much code should be left in the base app, and I'm ready to think about the environment on which the customer is going to be using. So when moving from CL to AL, most of the customers will probably still be using the RTC client we all know and love. But in the 150 version of Business Central, the Windows client has been depreciated. And the issue is that if we would want to move from CL to AL, we would need to think about that the RTC client is no longer available, and the customer is going to be using the web client. And with the web client, there comes additional limitations. And one of those limitations is run on client functionality. So if I have any type of .NET run on client functionality, I will not be able to run that specific code in my extension. I will get an error that please re-implement this functionality. Also, any file upload or download functions in the solution will need to be re-implemented for the solution to work. And this re-implementation can be quite different. Maybe I'm going to use Azure functions. Maybe I can use a different type of storage. But this is still going to be needed to re-implement. And after the web client step, we need to start thinking about data migration. And the data migration is a strange step, which is not as easy as it used to be before, and it may cause some additional issues. One of the things is why data migration is different when talking about CL to CL and CL to extensions is that in extensions, a different type of storage is used. For example, if I am moving from CL to CAL, all modifications are made directly on tables. If I added an additional field, I know that on that specific table, there will be an additional field. In AL, if I have an extension, an additional companion table is created with the same primary keys, and I will need to rethink how I need to move this data. And the Microsoft documentation really goes quite in depth of how to migrate from CL to AL. It goes through all the steps from A to Z, and it works quite perfectly. Not perfectly, but it works as well. And after the data migrations part, you're ready to use this solution on-premise. And yeah, after you're done, the cleanup, the CL to AL, the base app modifications, the move to events, the web client implementation, and the data migration, you're done and you're able to work in an on-premise solution. The fact is that sometimes on-premise is not enough, and some customers want to start using the SaaS solution, and maybe they want to publish their solution on app stores. That means some additional steps are required for them to start using their solution on the SaaS version. And we always recommend moving firstly to an on-premise release of Business Central, the newest release of Business Central on-premise, and then start thinking about moving to the SaaS. And to get ready for the SaaS, let's say that I have already moved my code to an on-premise solution on the newest version of Business Central, and there are a couple of things that I need to fix. The first thing is, if I have still some base app modifications, I need to remove these base app modifications or move these base app modifications to the extension that I'm gonna publish on the SaaS solution. The next thing is that I need to eliminate any type of .NET functionality because it will not be available on the SaaS tenant of Business Central. Lastly, if I am using any functionality that should have access to any server resources, maybe file downloads, uploads, and etc., I would need to re-implement them in a separate way. And after I have done these 3 steps, I'm almost ready to publish my app onto the SaaS. So the first thing is, if I want to publish my application to the SaaS and specifically to App Source, I need to go through all the App Source requirements line by line on my solution in order to publish this application on App Source. If I know that my application goes through the App Source fully and correctly, I can publish this extension to the SaaS and to App Source. If I don't want to publish to App Source, I still need to look through all the per tenant extension requirements in order to know that I will be able to use my extension on the SaaS. And lastly, if everything is perfect, you have a SaaS ready solution for any customer or for your customers or even yourselves to be ready to be used on the SaaS. So we have talked a lot about what steps do we have and what transition capabilities, what target platforms, and how to move from CL to AL. So how do you know all the limitations, all the solution problems, and what conflicts and the scope of how much it would take to move the solution from CL to AL? So at One Click Factory, we have a service called CL to AL Extension Analyzer. And this specific extension analyzer does a couple of things. So first off, it's a self-service report in which you upload an FOB file and we identify the list of conflicts that you as a Dynamics partner or a customer might encounter when moving a solution from CAL to AL. Next to those conflicts, for every conflict, we recommend a specific solution which is based on One Click Factory's best practices. So you get not only the issues for your solution, but also the suggested resolution on how you may fix these specific issues on the solution. And last but not the least, at the end of the report, we specify a primary or preliminary estimate of how much time it might take for you to move this solution from CL to AL. And if you're not sure if you want to try out this functionality, the overview report of CL to AL Extension Analyzer is free, and you're able to download a Word file, and it will show you some specific scope, some specific issues. And if you like what you see, you can download or buy the Excel report, and you will be able to see the conflicts resolution and the estimates. So let's have a quick demo of CL2 extensions, and let's jump back in. And this is the CL2 Extensions Analyzer report. And this report has all the information that you may need. And the interesting part about this report doesn't start in the intro, it starts in the second tab. And the second tab has all of the objects that we have analyzed on your solution. And these objects have three states. If you have modified the solution, or you have modified any of these objects, the object status is going to be changed. If you have left it completely equal as before, you have not touched it ever, it's going to be equal. And if you have added additional tables or objects, you can click, you're going to have a state or status called insertion. And these are all the objects that we analyzed when moving your solution and looking through what limitations you may have while moving from CL to AL. And the most interesting part of the report is the third one, the third tab. And this tab has all of the information about the issues that your objects have when you would move from CL to AL. So let's do a brief, quick intro. So we have the third table called payment terms, and we can see that some code has been added to this specific table. And we have a specific solution to every problem that has been added quite in detail. But one of the best parts is that we have identified that you have added the code, and we identify the closest available events and publishers that are next to the code. Next to that, we identify in which place it is, and also what specific code has been added for the solution in the solution. And we can do this, and for every problem, for every limitation, we have a separate resolution advice. One of the cool parts of the report is that we have split every limitation into specific transition steps that we have talked about during the webinar. So for example, if I open this up, I have all the transition steps that we have talked about. So for example, the cleanup, the conversion to AL, data migration, moving to events, the SaaS compatibility, web client compatibility, and etc. So let's say that I want to know what solutions or what variables are no longer needed and are unused in my solution. I can just click on cleanup, click OK, and if I go to the left side, I'm going to see all of my solutions and all of the variables that are unused in my solution, and I will be able to delete them straight still on the CAL side. Okay, so I'm going to quickly undo the filter, and I'm going to select all and click OK. Okay, perfect. The third part of the report is the summary. And the summary is a really interesting part due to the fact that it has all of the numbers of the conflicts identified and how many hours it might take for you to move that solution from CL to L. I would like to note that these numbers are quite preliminary, and it may differ from partner to partner, but these are the numbers how we identify them. The cool part is that on the left side, we have split every one of these hours into specific transition steps, the same steps that we have talked about during the webinar: cleanup, solving incompatibilities, moving to existing events, and etc. So let's say that I see that the current solution that I have added might need 3,000 hours to implement to AL. So but I know that my customer is not going to be using the SaaS application. He is still going to be using the on-premise version of Business Central. And we can see that get ready for SaaS might take 1,000 hours. And this is not quite correct for my customer because he's not going to be using the SaaS application. So what I could do is I could take 3,000 and add a minus with 1000, and I would basically have 2000 hours and some bits for the solution. But the cool thing about this specific page part is that every field is calculated dynamically according to the findings and advices that are on the Excel. That means that if I jump back to the findings and advices and then filter on the SaaS compatibility, I will have all the issues that are concerned with the SaaS compatibility. And if I would delete every one of these issues and then click delete, and then refilter it back to how it was before and jump back to the summary, I would see that the get ready for SaaS part is 0, and I'm going to see the specific total development effort that is needed for moving my solution to the on-premise. And this is the cool part of the report. I'm able to have all the hours according to the findings and advices in the summary, which are basically preliminary as well. So this is the power of the CL2 Extensions Analyzer. You can upload a FOB file and then get specific limitation reports on your solution. So yeah, we are on the last leg of the webinar. So let's talk about what questions were asked before the webinar, and let's answer them accordingly. So one of the questions that was asked was about the services that we have in One Click Factory, and there has been some minor confusion about these services. And these are all the services that you can access from the One Click Factory portal: CL2 Extension Analyzer, some AX stuff, and etc. So the thing is that these two services, the CL2 Extension Analyzer and the upgrade for NAV and Business Central, have been causing issues for some customers that might get confused because of the naming. So how to know which one of these is for me? So the CL Extensions Analyzer is the thing that we have talked about 3 or 5 minutes ago. It's for partners who want to know what kind of difficulties they may have when they're moving their solution themselves from CL to extensions in specific detail. And also, one of the key things is that if a partner wants to know a specific scope of their solution when moving from CL to AL, they can use this self-service report for themselves. And also, one of the key things that I need to remind is that if you want to know what custom functionality might take the most time to implement, or maybe what custom functionality will need to be implemented in the solution, you might, in this report, you will have all the information you may need. So the upgrade for NAV and Business Central service is for partners who want to get an analysis of their project and how much would it cost if they would want to outsource their specific project at One Click Factory. The cool thing about this specific service is that everything is fixed price, and if they want to know how much this upgrade is going to cost, they're going to get a fixed price report of how much it would cost for them to upgrade a specific project of NAV or Business Central to in a fixed price. Next to that, we offer specific upgrade options and additional pre-upgrade discussions for the customers or for the partners, for them to start thinking about how do they want to upgrade, what functionality they want to upgrade, and etc. And one of the coolest things is that we have specific upgrade actions that allow the customer or the partner to choose in real time what action should be taken with specific add-ons, and they're going to get a real-time return in the solution. Thank you all for attending, and I wish you a great evening and a great day. Thank you.